Arrow from American Compliance Systems. I'd like to thank everyone who's participating today with our program is How to Protect Your Business from Cyber Attacks. For all of you that are attending, we welcome you. We also want to point out that it really shows that you care and are concerned about the problems of cybersecurity that are in the headlines on almost a daily basis. The goal of our program today is to give you the most current information from top experts so that you can identify where exposures are and then take actions to reduce, eliminate, or plan for them. Our format is pretty straightforward. We have panel experts who will discuss specific areas of concern or problems. All participants can submit a question via the question or dialogue box either during the program or after the program. And we will put all these together, and all questions and answers will be sent to all participants so that everybody can share in the information. And the next slide, please. As the farmers' insurance commercials that are so prevalent on TV say, it is what you don't know that can hurt you. And this is so true for cyber and cybersecurity. Every day, our businesses are the potential target from a worldwide network of criminals whose main purpose is to profit by stealing or making unusable business, private, confidential information, records, or forms, or even money that we need to function. And as one of our panel experts says, it's not a matter of if, but when. Other experts suggest that the tools and resources and weapons used today by cyber criminals are more advanced and abundant than our ability to stop them. And in simple terms, this means the bad guy's ability to hurt us is far ahead of the good guy's ability to stop them. And a major reason for this is that most entities don't know how to identify problems and do not have a sufficient program on a 24/7 basis to vigilantly monitor for intrusions or problems or issues so that they can be nipped in the bud before they cause major damage. It's kind of like having your office or facility in a very high crime area with no monitoring or alarm systems. The good news is that ACS has developed a turnkey solution that's comprehensive, easy to implement and maintain, and budget friendly. And we're more than eager to review this, how it works, the benefits it provides with either you or your insurance agent. However, we really want to turn to the main reason we're here today and focus on the valuable information that our experts have been assembled to provide. And before I begin, I'd just like to briefly overview and address a little bit of the background of them. Next slide, please. The first speaker will be John Mullen. John's a managing partner and chair of the U.S. Data and Privacy and Network Security Group for a major law firm, Brisbois. And he is known for his ability to kind of walk people through and help understand and feather through the complex federal, state, and international rules and laws. John's been recognized and been counsel and helped advise many of the key players on a number of cybersecurity issues. The next presenter after John will be Mark. And Mark is one of the creators of NetDiligence, and NetDiligence has really provided a great deal of information about cybersecurity that are used by U.S. and U.K. insurers. In addition, his company has been used to verify appropriate levels of network security safeguards by companies. Mark's presentation will be followed by Brian Thornton. Brian is known for his ability to help feather through the myriad of details and variances from one carrier's policy to another. Mark has also a great deal of experience in insurance and especially the cyber area. But one of the things that in particular we've become aware that Mark can help is either for a company or their agent. Mark has the ability to help them understand and get the best coverage with the best carrier at the best price. So without further ado, I want to just once again thank everybody for coming, and now I'd like to turn it over to our first panelist, John Mullen. John?
Well, thanks for having me today. And why don't we just pop this first slide, and I'll ask the audience a couple questions that, because they're on mute, they can't answer, but it still helps to think. Most companies have been gathering data since I was a kid. Now, I was a kid 50 years ago, so it's been a while, right? But even when I was in school up at Penn State, et cetera, one of my healthcare cards when I was at the university, the membership number for my healthcare while I was at school was my Social Security number. And that's not unusual, and that's typical. So most companies cannot answer the following question. What data do you gather? Where do you keep it? Who has access to it? When do you purge it? How do you secure it? Most people, companies at the highest end of the business and the lowest end of the business scale, you're talking Fortune 100, and companies who have 3 people in their operation can't answer those questions. And I've asked those questions of the top IT security people for a lot of those companies, and largely you get a blank stare. So just think about what that means in today's environment. People gather, they try to figure out where they're keeping it, they don't know where the duplicates are, they don't know who has real access to it, they don't know what the admin levels are to get in, to get out, to change it, etc., where it's been saved, in some corner of a new system, all of those kind of questions. So that's sort of point one. Ask yourself this: do you have any idea what's on the hard drive of your own computer? When you hit delete on email, it's not necessarily off the hard drive. So those are some of the basic common world complexities of handling data. Let's just look at this slide. And the reason we're going to look at these 3 definitions, and as a lawyer, I hate to give people homework and I hate to get overly technical, so we'll keep it pretty easily understood. PHI is personal health information. It sounds what it is, right? You all think you know what personal health information is, but I'll just throw a little quick quiz at you. If you have a list of names attached to a document with the letterhead of, let's just say, University of Pennsylvania Hospital, is that PHI? Under some laws it is, under some laws it isn't. But what if it's not Pennsylvania Hospital? What if it's Fox Chase Cancer Center or Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center? Well, that changes the analysis a little bit. Even though the only thing that changed is a letterhead, now you know somebody on that list either has cancer or probably has a family member with cancer. So that's a lot closer to PHI, and all we did was change the name. So point being, definitions are never quite as simple as they seem. PII is personally identifiable information. This is a tricky one. This is a bit of a catch-all. 47 states plus territories plus international law define PII differently. PII is, in its shortest version, what we have here. It's somebody's name with identifying information. It can often be a state-issued number, like a social security or driver's license. It can be medical information. It could be financial information, like you see on the front of a check. Now it's things like email address, username, and password, and that's an increasing trend. The tricky part about that last piece is you can change an email, username, and password in 5 minutes, and yet if somebody finds your old one because they hack into a system, they've actually triggered a law. So that's pretty tricky in the fact that these PII definitions literally are changing by the month. We have a team of 12 lawyers on my team. Firm's almost 1,000, but the team is 12. And we have a hard time keeping up, and this is all we do, and we have a hard time keeping up with all these definitional changes and proposed changes from state to state, country to country. So you can only imagine how hard it is if you're not paying attention. And the third part is the cards. That's easier, right? That's debit cards and credit cards. So that's the world as run by Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover. So that's at least a little easier to get your head around, what's going on with that. Now, where are the threats coming from? And I think Mark will talk about this later. In my world, we get a net new breach claim every business day of the year. So we'll get about 250 of them this year. That's actual cases where data has been either compromised or potentially compromised. And we see an unbelievable spectrum of fact patterns, as easy as Brian Thornton mailed Mark Greisiger's W-2 to the wrong person, all the way through to China hacked your system, and every piece of data you've ever had since you opened is gone or corrupted, et cetera, et cetera. So it can be quite a variety of what we see. But at the end of the day, the threats come in three buckets. One, bad guys. That's the hacker that was alluded to earlier. That's even the guy who's not such a brilliant bad actor, a hacker. It could be the guy who takes a brick and busts a window on a Saturday and walks out with 7 computers. So you got the malicious actors on the left. In the middle, you've got employees. Employees make mistakes. They don't update patches. They unknowingly allow Google search to get in and take a whole bunch of data and list it on Google. We see that all the time. If somebody will search for their college records or their healthcare records, and they'll see their records, and then they'll see everybody else's records, and then they'll call and say, you know, I just found on a Google search what looks like thousands of records from your school or hospital or retail or whatever it is. So that's the kind. So you've got bad actors on the left. In the middle, you've got employees making mistakes. And then the wild card that is the most difficult to control is vendors. You guys can have the perfect security and the perfect employees, and no one has either, by the way, but let's assume you did. You have vendors. They are companies. They are providing services. They have access to your systems, your data, your security, your information, and they can have problems, and that causes you problems. So the list of where the problem comes from is almost never ending, and those are just some quick highlights. Just jump to the next slide if we could. Yeah, there you go. So why does any of this matter? I mean, if companies were gathering data in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and it was sort of a big so what? Well, the reason it matters is this slide. These laws that are illustrated on this slide, they didn't exist until the 2000s. So for years, companies gathered data, and they always thought, oh, well, it might be useful, in our next marketing campaign. Maybe we can in some way monetize this data, and we have it, and we might as well keep it. And it's so cheap to keep anymore because computer systems are cheaper every week, right? So that was the way people thought. And until these laws came into place, it didn't really have much of a downside. But these laws create duties related to data that just weren't there before. And probably everybody on this phone or someone in their family has received a letter in the mail at some point from some company saying, hey, your data may have been compromised, and sorry about that, and we're going to try to fix it, and we take security seriously, and we're going to offer you credit line. Well, those letters don't come because people decided in the year 2003 to become good corporate citizens and transparent and forthcoming. They come because these laws said they had to send them. And that's really where all this comes from. So you're gathering data, and now they have these laws imposing duties on companies that gather data and hold data. And the laws say, among other things, you've got to tell the people who are involved. You may have to tell, if you look at the second bullet point, the attorney general of that individual state. And mind you, it's where your company clients are today. So if you have a company that's based, let's say, in central New Jersey, and you think you're local, well, if you have a bunch of clients, the chances that they all live in Jersey are probably not high. The chances that they never moved, since you've got clients going back, years, if not decades, are slim to none. So once they start moving around the country, or kids spin off, go off to college, or whatever they do, now you've got people throughout the country. So it's not where you are. It's where your clients live today, or where the people who were your clients, but you still have their data, live today. And so that adds to the complexity. So most cases that we see have multiple states involved, and about half of those states require not only notice the individual within certain time frames and under certain guidelines of content, etc., but also notice to a state agency of some sort, whether it be the Attorney General, Consumer Protection. In New Jersey, it's the state police. So it just depends, right? And there's all kinds of notice levels as quick as 48 hours under some circumstances in some states. A lot of different complexity moving around, and try managing that when you don't even know what happened when the facts come in. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some of the other things. Now that's the first slide I showed you there with the map was states. This is federal. And this is just HIPAA, right? So there's other federal laws that come into play. But for now, let's just talk about HIPAA. And HIPAA is it's been out there now for a decade, easily a decade plus. They had a final rule clarify some things a year or so ago, and the threshold by which HIPAA considers a breach to have happened is very low. In other words, get a bad guy in your system, and oftentimes we'll bring in forensics and we realize, oh, maybe they didn't pull the data out. At least we can't see that they actually extracted any data from this computer system. HIPAA says if you have granted unauthorized access to data, you've triggered the law. That means once a bad guy is in your system and gets into a part of the system where there's PHI, if you can't prove the bad guy didn't see it or couldn't get to it, you're done. You have triggered notice duties. And once you do that, you've got to tell the individuals involved, you've got to tell Health and Human Services. OCR is the investigatory arm for Health and Human Services, their Office for Civil Rights. They pretty much will investigate any case above 500 records compromised. They will wait 6 months, 9 months after an event, and all of a sudden you'll get a letter, and it asks for a massive amount of information. And the worst part about these investigations, OCR people are perfectly nice people to deal with. The problem is when you have a breach or an issue and you tell Health and Human Services under statute, OCR is going to come in and ask you questions about 5 years of training, 5 years of policies and procedures and updates and all kinds of things. So they use the splinter of the breach to build a boat with it. I mean, they come back in and they will ask you for a whole history of all kinds of information, and you will find yourself in a heavy-duty paper battle hoping not to get fined. So it's a pretty tricky space, and it is not cheap. Next slide. So this is just some examples of settlements that have happened for OCR investigations. I mean, we had one. It was out west, and the company used a local cloud. So they lost 2,500 records. It was healthcare, and it wasn't even a big deal. 2,500 records, pretty manageable number, and it wasn't their fault. They had a cloud provider who actually said to the authorities, "My bad, my fault." So here's my client, clearly not at fault. They used this cloud provider. The cloud provider did the right thing, stepped up, took responsibility. They took care of notice on time. They noticed the appropriate regulators on time. They did everything right on time. 3 years of investigations looking into policies and procedures and risk management history and all of this. And ultimately, we were told, and this is with high levels of cooperation, good rapport with OCR, right? So no big fight. Everybody was getting along. All that investigation later, including 10 depositions, they get on the phone, they read 10 minutes worth of mumbo jumbo about this law applies, that law applies, and they say you're eligible for up to a $3 million fine. However, because you've cooperated so well and because you've really worked and shown you that you're earnest about data security, we're only going to fine you $150,000. Okay, so the $150,000 was covered by insurance, which is great, but think about that: 2,500 records, and they got fined $150,000, and I guarantee they spent more than that in a couple of years of dealing with it in terms of legal fees, forensics, and all this other stuff. So that was for 2,500 records, and it wasn't even their fault. So you get on the wrong side of OCR, you're going to have a problem. Last year, OCR fined a hospice, if you can believe it. I mean, who finds a hospice? But they did. So, it's not always a logical or easy situation to deal with once you're on the radar of these guys. They are self-funded, meaning the lawyers at OCR, if they don't find people, they don't have a budget the next year to keep their jobs. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about what happens before I turn this over to Mark. We got the payment card issue. I'll touch that quickly. If you take credit card, you are subject to the PCI DSS requirements. That's a security standard. If you lose credit cards, even if it's not your fault, even if your POS vendor, your point of sale vendor, is the reason that you lost them, they get hacked in some fashion, you have a high likelihood of being investigated by the PCI industry, and that is not statutory. That's contractual, and there is no due process. So that's a very expensive place, and the assessments that are issued are significant, and they're much higher on average than the government assessments because it's all contractually driven. So just beware. If you've got PCI and you're taking credit and debit cards, you better know that you're compliant. You better know how to deal with the breach. You better have something in place to back you up if the PCI investigators come looking. So why don't we pop to the next slide, because I know we're running out of time here. I want to walk through, if I could, a real quick timeline. This is the way a breach goes down. It's not like a lawsuit where you get a piece of paper in the mail, you've got 30 to 60 days to respond, and then you can lawyer up, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the way it works. You get hacked, or data is lost, and you become aware of it. Let's make it a Friday evening. You need to have access, and this is the beauty of the policies that are out there in the market. They will give you access to call a breach coach. That's a firm like mine. And we get on the phone with you that evening. We become your lawyer on the phone call, establish attorney-client privilege, interview you, in effect, interrupting the whole way through because we're clarifying all the facts. And at the end of call one, we know what's going on. At least we know what you know. And then immediately, especially if it's an intrusion into your system, we bring in forensics that night. And we will have you on the phone at 9 o'clock at night on a Friday in the summer if we need to, with a forensic company who's interviewing your IT guys, talking to them, and then people are on planes or remotely accessing your systems that night or in the morning, so that all weekend long you're getting help on forensics. The job of a forensic company, as used under these policies and under this regime, is to come in and get you safe. That's first and foremost. Get the client safe. Kill the bad guy and get the client safe. Then tell us where the bad guy went and where they didn't go. So if you have 500,000 records, you want to get safe, and then you want somebody to tell you what did he take. And you might hear something like, well, he took 50,000 records. Well, that's not good, and we'll have an issue there. We've got lots of things to do with those 50,000, but he might also tell you that he didn't take or touch 450,000, and that could save your business. So it's put the fire out, tell me what burned, tell me what didn't burn. That's what you do with forensics. Once you figure out, and this is the lawyer's job with forensics and the company, figure out what the scale of all this looked like. Then you look at where these folks are from who are impacted, look at the state laws, and then you go through the whole compliance regime of getting letters out, contacting individuals, setting up a call center, dealing with frequently asked questions and anticipating what they're going to be, possibly media inquiries coming in depending on what your company is and how public facing you are. And you're dealing with all of this within 5-6 days. So you're dealing with PR issues, you're dealing with forensics issues, you're setting up mailings and call centers, you're working on frequently asked questions, you might be dealing with the press, you can very likely be dealing with law enforcement all at the same time. So if you don't have forensics and lawyers and call center people who know what they're doing, who know the drill and know how to get through that, it's an absolute train wreck. And we've seen it happen where we come in because someone didn't know to call the right people, and by the time you get involved, there's blood in the water everywhere because people made a series of wrong decisions. So you get in the experts, and there are other law firms, not just mine, who do it, but there's a limited amount of law firms and a limited amount of forensics and a limited amount of call centers who know this space because of the speed involved and the complexity of the law and the variety of the fact patterns is what happens. So that is my way of kicking it over to Mark so he can give you a little more stats about how the industry is shaping up and what's going on. But that's the real short version of what we do, folks.
Thank you, John. If you can go to the next slide. So, hello, everybody. Mark Greisiger with NetDiligence. What I wanted to do is give you a glimpse of what my company is seeing day in and day out. We support over 50 national insurance companies who offer cyber risk insurance coverage. And so does John Mullen and his firm and Brian Thornton. And when we go in, we assess the security and privacy practices for the companies, the organizations that these insurance carriers want to insure to help the client, the CFO, the risk manager, the treasurer, gauge whether their security and privacy practices are of a reasonable nature. I'm going to give you a little glimpse of that towards the end of this. But the other thing, when we get into a discussion with the CFO, the risk manager, they ultimately want to know how real is this problem? What's actually happening out there? Which sectors are being attacked? Who's having losses? What on average is being paid out? They want to know how real is this. You can't go a week without reading something in the paper about some company and some sector having some catastrophe. And the shocking thing is all the big companies you've been reading about on a weekly, monthly basis who have these massive data breach events, I could tell you this, they all take security very seriously. They have hundreds of millions of dollars in security budgets, 100 or 200 dedicated security staff, yet they get hit almost on a yearly basis. The problem can be that challenging. So what we did, my company does, with the 50 carriers we work with in a variety of ways, we go around to them each year, we do an annual cyber claim study, and we collect the sampling of the claims that they paid out for data breach events. In this most recent year, 2015, the current report is still being written and analyzed, won't be out to this fall, but we had a few preliminary sides that I wanted to show Robert and the folks on this phone, just give you a glimpse of what we think the numbers are coming in for this year. We're at about 150 claims for the year, the sampling that we collected, even though this slide mentions 139 because I gave these numbers at my conference in June. It was 139 then. Next slide, please. We'll start with the data type, and John went into the three top data types that you see on the screen. PII, personal identifiable information, your social security number, things like that, that was most frequently caught up in some kind of a data breach event that turned into an insurance claim. Followed by, right behind it would be PCI, the credit card related data, and then followed by protected health information. Next slide. What was the leading causes of losses? This has changed over the last few years, and I find it interesting. Number one coming in this year, and other studies by other experts out there is really coming with the same results. Hackers, by far causing most of the losses, about 32%. As you can see, followed by malware or viruses, about 15%, and then rogue employees, about 12%. Last year and the year before that, I believe it was lost laptops. And as John can attest to this, because his team deals with data breach events on average 1 per day, it's just shocking how many times you see a lost laptop event. And it's analogous to a bad guy walking out the door with your server, because those laptops can still have 1 million customer records on it. But the good news is it seems like there's awareness starting to trickle out there about that risk issue, and more laptops either have whole disk encryption in place. So if they are lost, you basically have some element of safe harbor. You don't have to report the event. Or there's just better policies being enforced that don't allow staff to put a zillion customer records on a laptop that's not fully protected. So, next slide. Which business sectors are seeing the most losses? This would be healthcare followed by retail, or healthcare followed by financial services, and then retail after that. These happen to be the 3 top sectors being insured by cyber liability coverage by all the major carriers. Retail, healthcare by far. And healthcare is really seeing a lot of losses because they're highly regulated. As John mentioned, there's the HIPAA high-tech legislation. What that high-tech part did a few years ago is give attorney generals in every state power to actually enforce that federal law and fine organizations for healthcare related breaches that could be really a modest size, 500 records or more, and they could be coming after you. So we find a lot of the risk managers are running scared in that sector. And the other challenges with healthcare in general is some of them are nonprofits. Even if they aren't a nonprofit, they don't have tremendous IT security budgets in line with some of their corporate counterparts. They also have a high degree of connectivity from third-party vendors and partners, doctors' offices, nursing homes, teaching institutes, and so on, all connecting into the same networks, and a lot of sharing and swapping of data, and that leads to breakdowns. So that sector, we always see that probably remaining at the top, quite honestly. Next slide, please. Organizational size isn't as, I think, as interesting, mainly because this study is skewed more to the small to medium-sized organizations. We're at the mercy of the sampling of data that we receive from the carriers, and we just happen to have greater samples of small or medium-sized organizations who are seeing losses. But this just gives you a breakdown of of the organizational size of the study for the claims that we saw. Next slide, please. Let's talk about average cost. What's actually being paid out? The average data breach event paid out by the insurance industry this past year is $105,000. If you factored in the fact that most companies have an SIR of a certain amount, and if the assumption was the SIR was exhausted, the actual average came in at $1.2 million per data breach event. To a Fortune 500 company, not a big deal. I can tell you, to a small, medium-sized organization, which this happens to every day, it's life-threatening to them. So the claims range was pretty great, anywhere from 0 to $15 million in our study. Typical claims, and John sees this all the time, in the area of $35,000 to about $322,000. That's a very typical, everyday event happening. A lot of clients love to know what's the average cost per record. If I have 1,000 records in my system or 1,000,000 records in my system, and bad guy gets access to all those records, what am I looking at? It's really challenging to break a study like this into a per records cost, but we do it just because whenever you use the word average or the method of averaging, it's deceptive. Our study shows over $1,000 per record. But if you look at the range, it's anywhere from literally 2 cents up to $35,000 per record. A tremendous range. You could have a large company with millions of records breached, and if you look at what they end up paying for litigation and everything at the end of the day, it could literally be pennies on the record. On the flip side of it, you could see relatively small organizations, especially in healthcare, who might have 1,000 or 500 records breached with highly sensitive health information, and they spend a tremendous amount of money investigating that event, notifying those victims, dealing with attorney generals and federal government agencies and so on. So their cost per record for that sector, that size, can be tremendous. Next slide, please. Crisis service costs. Whenever you have an event, I know Brian will go into some of this, whenever you have an event, whether you're sued or not, or a government agent is coming after you or not, you have duties, per what John was telling you about all the state laws driving compliance. You have to do certain things in this crisis phase where a bad event happened. You now have to hire legal counsel. We call that person a breach coach to give you some immediate guidance. That person will often bring in forensics and other experts. There's a cost to that. The average cost for those crisis service costs, literally in the first week of this event happening, came in at about $539,000 per event. If you did see litigation, the average cost to defend yourself from legal action, $434,000 per event, and the average cost of a settlement for data breach event, $1.2 million. Thank you. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about cyber risk assessments and cyber risk management strategies for risk managers. We say risk manager. We deal with organizations of all sizes. It could be a formal corporate insurance risk manager. It could be the treasurer of the company who buys the insurance. It could be a CFO who's in charge of everything. It's important in the conversation with that business person that they understand, no matter what their IT guys tell them or what their vendors who they rely on tell them, security of their data is never going to be 100%. I don't care how much tremendous security resides around that data, there's always breakdowns. And so they need to look at this issue through a prism of traditional risk management, the 4 legs. What parts of the risk can they eliminate? What parts are they going to be able to just reduce or mitigate? There's going to be some parts of this cyber risk they're going to have to accept, especially if you're dealing with clouds. I could, real quick on this issue, I could tell you I got tired of hearing the word cloud a few years ago because none of our clients really cared that much about that risk issue. Risk managers, it wasn't on their radar. It's changed 180 degrees the past year or so because I would say 99% of companies we assess depend on third-party cloud operations in a significant way now. And when you talk about cloud risk, a lot of it is contractual risk. What does the SLA look like? Most of the time it's going to say, we as a cloud, if we screw up, you, customer, are going to defend and indemnify us. It could be that bad. So with cloud risk or third-party contractual risk, you have a decision whether you're going to accept that or not. The reason for going to the cloud typically is this tremendous savings where you don't have to do your own computing anymore, literally. So, and then the fourth leg is cede the residual risk through cyber liability coverage. Assessments. Whenever we assess an organization, it's not just about doing a penetration test on some server that they depend upon, or it's really looking at their organization with a wide-angle lens, looking at the people, the processes and policies, and the technology all together across their full enterprise. It starts with the people. Do the people in charge of IT and protecting your information assets, your client data, do they get it? Do they care about their job? Do they feel they have the reasonable IT and security budget to do a vigilant job on a daily basis? Do they also have the supporting processes in place, such as customer education, employee education and training, change management processes, an incident response plan in place that's tested, these ongoing processes that are going to serve to help them in the long run. And then the final thing is looking at the technology. Do they actually have reasonable security and privacy practices in place for an organization of their size and scope of what they're doing? So that means a small company shouldn't be judged against the practices of a large bank. But the general technology we're looking at out there is intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems, data loss prevention software, daily hardening and patching of your servers to prevent the bad guys from getting in every day, and increasingly encrypting all your private data at rest in the databases. And that's easier said than done, I can tell you that, because 90% of companies do not encrypt all their private information at the so many places it resides throughout their organization. Next slide. Some of the general cyber threats, and John touched on this, so I'm not going to go deeply into these sections, but you can see, loss of your data, loss of your reputation, class action liability from any of these kind of things. There's insider cause losses, there's outside cause losses, there's disgruntled staffers and contractors who make mistakes. It may not even be a hacking event. It might be someone hit the delete key and erased a whole hard drive, as an example. We see clients send out information either in email or in hard copy paper form with a ton of private information in there accidentally printed, and it goes out to thousands of people. That's a massive privacy violation they're looking at. Yes, you do see outside hackers or attackers or crackers. There's intrusion attacks, there's denial of service attacks, knocking down their servers for 10 hours for 2 days, and then that's a business interruption loss to them. You see a tremendous amount of social engineering. You see people sending phishing attacks to some of the smartest IT guys. Their systems are broken into because they were phished. They were just simply duped into clicking on something they shouldn't have clicked on, and that happens a lot. So this list is just high level right here, and within each of these categories is a lot of subcategories. Next slide, please. So when you look at a cyber risk assessment, you're looking at both privacy and security equal. I can tell you this, and John can also tell you, we're seeing litigation from privacy-related events that have nothing to do with an actual security breach. There's a growing trend of litigation where managing your data in a responsible way, in an ethical way, is becoming an important risk management issue. If you're collecting information on your clients in a covert manner, and it's outside what you posted on your privacy policy facing the world, to a plaintiff lawyer or to attorney general, that's a deceptive trade practice. We're seeing a lot of litigation there. So we look at security and privacy practices equal. They can both cause liabilities, and they both fall under this umbrella term, cyber risk. The whole point of any assessment is to is really to build a picture that you have reasonable security and privacy controls in place. You want to benchmark to industry standards and even against peers in your industry. Are you doing similar things to guys down the street also in your industry? If you're in certain sectors, you want to show that you're in good faith compliance with certain regulations that call for reasonable security. If you're using a cloud, and most are, you want to really document what controls, if you even know, that cloud has in place to protect your data. And then the other thing that should come out of any assessment is lessons learned from past events. Pretty much all companies we assess own up to something happening, if not this year, the year prior to that. The problem is that frequent. The trick is, are you able to control the severity so it's more of a nuisance event as opposed to a catastrophe for your company? So an assessment should be a collaborative exercise. It's really meant for the CFO, not just for a CIO. It's really to educate the insurance buyer of the organization, because they're worried about the bottom line. And it's looking at the wide angle of issues: people, processes, and technology. And on the right-hand side there, I'm just giving you a couple example graphical screenshots in some of the reports out there. This also, by the way, doesn't have to be something that's done by an outside consultant. It's perfectly reasonable for your own IT guys to go through self-assessments, but to deliver a report for you as a business person that you can understand. You want to know, do you think your organization has a reasonable stance, or are there issues that keep your IT guys up at night and you're aware of them at least? So, and with that, I think I want to turn the baton over to Brian.
Thanks, Mark. I think so. You guys have kind of touched on the exposures, the claims, the security, and so I wanted to kind of take a step back and just kind of talk about a little bit about the coverage, the underwriting, and then the kind of sales component of this. And so to kind of take a step back, if we even go back in time historically with cyber, just for those that aren't ultra familiar with it, it kind of started off more as a media coverage, and then it kind of had added in a network security / virus coverage. And then kind of after that, we started to see adding in for cyber business interruption, cyber extortion, network asset damage, and it was really geared towards media companies and online retailers. And then kind of when we saw some changes really was when, if we look back at that, one of the first slides, when California passed notification legislation, a lot of states quickly started to follow that, and then you also had some updates to HIPAA about notification and what was required. And so that really changed what the kind of typical basic offering was. And so really when we talk about it, we're talking about first-party coverage as well as third-party coverage. And so here we've got the first-party coverage, which is going to cover the typical IT forensics, your legal / breach coach, which I always recommend that's the first call you make. And they should be kind of coordinating all this for you so that you can have that attorney-client privilege in place. And so it'll cover the IT forensics. You've got notification costs. You know, that can include the drafting of the actual letter and the message you want to give to your clients. It can also cover the actual physical printing and mailing of the letters. It also includes things like call centers, which even for a small, a relatively small breach, you still need something like that. And then often within those letters, you have to offer credit monitoring, as well as you may need the PR, which was this was in the timeline of what a typical breach looks like. You do need those things, and those are typical first-party coverages that would be included in a kind of standard policy these days. The way I would kind of label some of the next ones are additional first-party coverages. While they've been around for a while, they tend to be different on who necessarily needs them or wants them, and that would be the cyber extortion coverage, cyber business interruption coverage, and network asset damage. And so what that really is, cyber extortion is kind of what you would think it would be as far as a pure extortion, online extortion. You'll typically hear about this, and it's been in the news, and there's been TV shows about it, a crypto locker type event where someone comes into your company's network, encrypts it, and says they're going to delete the damage if you don't pay the fines or penalties. And I think one of the more funny recent examples in that space was, I believe there was a police department, I want to say they were in the Midwest, but it happened to them and they had to pay the ransom demand to get their network back. So it's not uncommon. Cyber business interruption tends to be geared towards anybody that's selling something online. That's kind of where it started. And then it has moved to kind of offline revenue from a cyber event that causes a true business interruption. And then the last piece there on the additional first-party coverages would be network asset damage. And what that is simply just the cost to rebuild your network after a hack or an event, whether that's your internet, website, shared drives, any data you hold electronically. If you want to jump to the next slide. And this is where it gets a little bit more tricky, and I think the kind of onus on the third party and the liability coverage here is it's a big component of the coverage that sometimes gets lost in the discussion because we get focused on the first party coverages. But the third party coverage really is covering all of your defense costs. Will be covering any sort of indemnity payment if there is one. You also have carve-backs for fines and penalties. So this could be PCI fines and penalties if it's a retail company or anyone taking credit cards, but it can also be regulatory fines and penalties. And so that does become a big piece of the defense side, all the different states that are involved. If you're notifying a lot of different regulators in a lot of different states, that certainly can add up. And if there's fines in multiple states, which is often the case, then you could be facing a lot of small fines that will add up or a lot of large fines that will really add up. And so I think one of the interesting examples I saw recently was there was a hotel that had a very small breach, and they were based, I want to say, down in New Orleans, and I think they had something about something like 80 or 100 records that they lost, but the individuals were in over 25 states, and so they had 25 different state rules that they had to navigate through. And so even a small breach can, as John had mentioned earlier, involve a lot of different states, so that's kind of an important component there. And then the other component on this, the third-party coverage, is contractual piece. So typically a good cyber policy is going to have contractual coverage in there. It's very important, especially for a small business, anyone who's taking credit cards. You know, a small business and even a medium-sized business, they don't have much leverage when they're entering into contracts. And so to have that coverage there to protect them is really valuable. If you want to jump to the next slide, this is where it can get interesting, and there's a lot of differences out there. And so, you know, the way we kind of break this down on the underwriting side is in the market, if you have 50 different kind of standalone markets, we do see a variety of different appetites. The forms are extremely different, and the coverage structures within the forms can be very different. And so some of the things we mean by that is that within all the exposures that we've kind of laid out, you've got very different appetites. So we've got some markets that are very aggressive on healthcare business. And then we've got some that are very hesitant on that business where they just charge much higher rates for healthcare. We've got some that love retail and some that are shying away from big retail point of sale exposure after we saw so many breaches in the news in the past year. You know, we see some carriers that are geared towards smaller businesses and accounts with less than 1 million records, and then we've got other markets that don't really play in that space, and they're only looking at larger middle market, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 type accounts. We've got a different range of appetite as far as some markets are giving full prior acts on the liability side. Some won't give any prior acts. Some of the triggers in the forms are on an occurrence base. Some are more on a claims made and reported base, and some are mixed between the first party and third party coverage component. And so you also see that a lot of carriers are giving, you know, a lot of the coverages started off as sublimits, and a lot of the forms now go up to full limits depending on the exposure. So there's a real variety between all the carriers. So as an example, some accounts that like healthcare are giving full regulatory coverage within their form, and some are giving very low regulatory sublimits. Some are very aggressive on retail, and they're giving full limits for PCI coverage for fines and penalties and remediation costs, and some are giving very small sublimits in PCI, and some are giving full limits on public relations expenses, and some are giving a very small sublimit. And so the reason I kind of mention all that is because you really have to gear in on a company and their specific exposures and what their kind of touch points are as far as where they are concerned to find the right market for them, and that is where it can become really difficult to navigate. And then when you look at the coverage structures in that bullet point, you've got things like carriers that will not only have different sublimits and different setups on the forms, but some will handle the breach for you. Some will give you a panel of experts and you get to kind of choose. Some will put notification of individuals outside the limit of the policy aggregate, and they'll give you an actual number of people that they would notify on your behalf. It's certainly incumbent on the broker then to make sure, and the client, that they're putting in a number in there that's adequate for them. And then some just use a dollar figure and then just add up the notification cost. So, different appetites, different forms, certainly very different coverage structures. And then the other component of the policy that kind of gets lost in the shuffle would be the pre-breach services, post-breach services, and claims. And so when you think about pre-breach and post-breach, that's where I would think about NetDiligence and the eRisk Hub, which is what they run for a lot of the carriers, and that's a great kind of value add, and it was something that was originally geared towards larger businesses, but now the value to me is really on the smaller and middle market company that doesn't have a 10-person IT department, and it's the owner and operator is also acting as the IT guy, and he might outsource some of it. Having access to that information that can be really valuable to them. And then on the claims side, there's a lot of different approaches on the claims side, and one of the things we typically like to look at is how many breaches has that company handled? Have they been doing this in a while? What vendors are they using, whether it's legal vendors, whether it's forensic vendors? Do they have the right reputation in that space? Because more so than anything in this type of environment, as you saw John's timeline, you get a very quick timeline with a lot going on, and you really need to make sure that that you're with the right person and that they've handled these claims and that they know what they're doing. And then the kind of last bullet point there, some ask a little and some ask a lot. There's a wide range of applications in the market. There's a wide range of information that each carrier wants. It will vary by industry, and then it will vary by size of the account. Account with 20 million in revenues, they might be able to get an application that asks 5 questions. You might also get another company that will give them an app that's 10 pages long and might ask up to 100 questions for the same risk. And so that does really kind of run the gamut, and it will also vary by industry. Certainly for a payment processor or something that's aggregating a lot of PII or PCI, you're going to see a lot more questions being asked. If you want to jump to the next slide. And so a couple of the things, typically from the underwriting process, most of the carriers are still basing their rates off of revenues and then having a variety of factors that are changing the debits and credits and cost based on different security factors. And so most of the rates being off revenues is kind of strange, because really what they're trying to get to at the end is how much data does the company have, and then how do they protect it. And some of the things that will come up is how do they protect it at rest, how do they protect it in transit, and then the next piece would really be encryption on mobile devices. That is a hot button issue for a lot of the carriers, and it is problematic for a lot of the smaller to mid-sized businesses that don't have a sophisticated IT department. And so we see this a lot where a company does not encrypt laptops, they don't encrypt tablets or even just mobile phones, but it's a question on the application, and that will generally automatically trigger a unencrypted data exclusion, which can be a large exclusion depending on the company and how they kind of manage their IT and their access points. And often when they do want that coverage, it is hard to get back until they've actually demonstrated that they've employed full encryption on all the devices that they're asking questions about. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. I don't see that standard really changing in the market too much. But for smaller to mid-sized businesses that don't have huge resources, often they're not encrypting. And so that will be a typical exclusion you would see. And then you may see some markets that are able to underwrite around it by asking about compensating controls or whether they don't store data in those places. But today, with typical kind of bring your own device mentality in a lot of small to mid-sized businesses, you will see a lot of that data is on tablets and laptops and phones, and there's not a lot of protection there. One of the other things on here was just as far as difficult risks. If you have an account that's a franchise or franchisor, they are problematic within the insurance market from the standpoint of aggregation of risk. Carriers don't do a great job of asking a lot of questions and tracking their exposure from that standpoint, and they are always worried about, and the product heads are constantly getting pulled in front of their board and their manager as far as how much exposure do they have to any particular one incident in the market triggering multiple policies. It's no different than what property carriers do when you're talking about hurricanes and earthquakes, and it is very problematic for small franchisees to get coverage. And so an example we saw was a local retailer submitted an application for cyber insurance. We quoted it, they didn't buy it. There was a large national breach at that franchisor that affected 200 plus franchisees. They came back and wanted the coverage, and everyone wanted to immediately decline that risk for coverage. And since then, we've seen a big uptick in automatic declinations for any sort of franchisee or franchisor. There's certainly markets that will underwrite around it, but it becomes more problematic, and then payment processors are certainly still difficult from the standpoint of any sort of aggregation of credit card numbers is problematic for some of the carriers, and then large healthcare is still probably a hot button issue for a lot of different carriers. If you want to jump to the next slide. So sales is really my last kind of bullet point to mention. What I typically recommend and where we typically see success is offering the coverage to all clients, whether it's a manufacturer, whether it's a retailer, whether it's healthcare, whether it's a association, whether it's a nonprofit. We're seeing everybody buy this in the small to mid-sized business world, where 2 years ago it was much less commonplace. And so I often talk to agents and ask them to offer it to all their clients to protect themselves, because it is a readily available product, and it's something that, you know, if they don't offer and it turns out that they do have a claim, they may be coming back at their insurance broker and wondering why they didn't explain the exposure to them or offer them some sort of coverage. And in the small to mid-sized business world, it is really much easier to get the coverage in place with very limited friction points compared to a much larger company. The key, in my view, is really knowledge. It's educating the client, potentially educating a broker, potentially educating multiple people. And so that's where we typically say go to an expert, whether that's an underwriter, whether it's an MGA, whether it's a wholesaler. You really need to have someone on the other end of the phone that can answer the questions and talk about the history and explain, you know, why things are problematic and how to kind of navigate what are the right markets, what are the terms and conditions, how they stack up. Can get really complicated, and so that's often where we say get on the phone. You really need to have a conversation, and often we're on conference calls with agents and their clients going through it in detail. You know, and we do see kind of that as being the kind of item that most likely gets an account over the hump to buy something. And so I think those are kind of my main kind of bullet points from that standpoint.
Great. Okay, well, that kind of is the last presenter. And I mean, as I'm sitting here, and I think many of us are listening to this, it really is mind-boggling, if you will, the level of areas and issues and complexities that abound. And what I really want to say is ACS is trying to bring information and expertise. And when you hear what these experts are saying, I think no one would come away without the feeling of, boy, I really do need an expert. And as complex as this is, and that's just what we're trying to say, and what ACS has developed is really for mid-level and small entities that don't even have an IT director. And in some cases, the owner-manager is the CFO and wears multiple hats. They face the same problems. And when you look at some of those numbers and consider some of the ramifications of the cost, it's like one problem and you're out of business. There are ways, though, to limit that, to insure for that, to get experts like a John or a Mark or a Brian to help you and the clients avoid those really dire consequences. And I think the takeaway that I would just most like to say is boy, really can't say it any more forcefully. Get to an expert. There's not a lot of them, but if you get to the ones like we presented here, you could go a long way to really protecting your business and your future. And we've gotten a number of questions in. We're pretty much at the balance of the limit. So we could just ask a couple, and then we'll summarize the others. But before I even do that, again, I just want to urge everybody, what we're trying to do is bring these experts to you. Any questions or information or follow-ups you want, we will gladly provide names, numbers, and contact points if you don't have it for the folks that are presenting and talking, or just kind of call our 800-55-HELPS number or email us or the contact, and we'll get you to the right person or people. And do want to thank once again all three of you, Mark, Brian, and John, for taking time, which I know out of your busy schedules, to relay some of your knowledge and expertise to us. But if we have another moment or two, Brian, here's one question. What are the most common stumbling blocks to selling insurance coverage? I mean, coming out of this, I think, gee, wouldn't everybody want to buy it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think typically what we see is education is one issue. The client either thinks that they're covered under a CGL policy or a BOP, or it's covered under their professional when it may not explicitly be, and they may, be very gray. And so that's one of the stumbling blocks. We, sometimes on a BOP you'll see a very small sublimit of $10,000, and it takes a lot to kind of convince them quickly of what their business is, how much data they have, and if they only lost a handful of records, that sublimit would be completely meaningless, and they'd be hung out to dry, and they wouldn't have access to all the right vendors and the right coverage. And so that takes a lot of education from that standpoint. We think also from the education standpoint, a lot of clients think they've outsourced their payment processing to a specific vendor, and so they don't have that exposure. And that it does take a little education to kind of relay everything to them and explain what the contract looks like and how that liability is really limited, and that they are going to be on the hook, and they really do need a policy to cover them for that. And it's not that the payment processing vendor is going to take care of them and handle that. And so we see that. We see, IT is scary, and so people want to bury their head in the sand. I would say those are kind of some of the biggest ones.
Sure. Well, good. Thanks for that. And there's corollaries to that question, but I just wanted to get one out for each of you. Then, John, here's a question. What's the typical interaction like with the regulators when reporting a breach? Are there any states or state attorney generals that are like easier or more difficult, or any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So because we work with them so often, we know these people. So the interactions are polite, but they can be firm. Some states simply don't care, even though they have the rule, and that's fine. And other states, and I'll give you a couple of the names, Vermont, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Indiana, California, those states, for reasons that anybody could guess but no one would know, are very active in their willingness to investigate, pursue investigations, issue fines, demand action plans, all that kind of stuff. So it has, I think, everything to do with who gets elected where and who gets put in what job. Some years the attorney generals in some states seem to care, others they don't. So it really is a variable, and that's the nature. When you're dealing with 47 state laws, you're always going to have some subset. I would say one thing. There is a trend to the list gets longer every year in terms of what states are active in the enforcement side.
Yes. Well, thanks, and thanks for that, John. And one other thing, too, and I know we hear this quite a bit, and I just want to say it from our perspective. John had touched on it with regard to his law firm has capabilities, and while there are others like it, there's not a whole lot of them. A very cautionary note, in all of these areas, in insurance, in the intrusions, in the legal aspects, there are not many players or providers, resources, experts like this that provide the breadth and scope and experience of these three companies and entities. So just as a cautionary note, we see it often that somebody turns to somebody that might be, somebody that wrote some code for them, or that they might be their friend or company attorney and they've advised them on numerous issues, or they might be someone they know for a long time. But with regard to cyber and cyber issues, you really need a current, knowledgeable expert, and there just are not a whole lot of them. So just for what it's worth, we would like to very much urge all the participants and everyone getting these programs, you really got to do your homework and make sure you're with the right people, have the right policy with the right coverage and the right support, because as we've seen in this, you could quickly blow past a limit or get one event as a very little company, doctor's office, small business, manufacturer, and it could spell the difference between, you're in business today and bankrupt tomorrow. And just like to add that. And finally, just one question, if you could, Mark. Are there any special cyber risk trends that, we all should be on the lookout for that you're seeing? I know you're seeing a lot of the data and analyzing it for claims, but also there's a lot of companies of all sizes, as we've discussed with Brian and you, that are having claims are having issues and don't result in a claim because they don't have insurance. But what other kind of trends are out there that you're seeing, either from claims or just from your company's expertise?
Hey, Robert, so there's three quick ones here. One is, John mentioned this early on, third-party contractors and clouds. I would say 1 in 3 claim events, or 1 in 3 losses, even if it's not an insurance claim, that you're going to see is going to be caused by one of your contractors, one of your service providers who's in a care, custody, and control of your data. Again, to the victim's eyes, to the plaintiff lawyer's eyes, to the regulator's eyes, you're still responsible. Be aware of that. The other trend also I mentioned real briefly is it's not just about security. Privacy practices are just as important, increasingly more important to some attorney generals and some plaintiff lawyers. So it's privacy ethics. You know, are you transparent with how you're collecting and sharing private information on your customers? Do those practices actually align with what your promises said in some posted privacy policy? That's a hot area of litigation. Just be aware. And then the final thing is more technical. Did someone have a question there? No, John?
No. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. The final thing, real quick, is be aware of mobile apps. Everybody has mobile apps on their phone. What's shocking to me is how many companies, large and small, now have their own mobile apps they're issuing. These mobile apps leak data like crazy. The reason is they're oftentimes developed by very small software shops who aren't really tremendous on secure code. They're offering borrowing libraries for the code to develop these apps from open source places on the internet, and sometimes those open source things are already infected, and even though the app might work, it might be actually transmitting data to unknown places. Stress test your app if you happen to have a company that's issuing a mobile app to clients. I think that's going to be another area to pay attention to, where we see plaintiff lawyers going after that. And also, just so you know, we've seen California Attorney General going after companies who have mobile apps. If that mobile app doesn't have a privacy policy embedded in it, they're trying to fine them $1,000 per download. So that's another risk issue to just be aware of. Thanks, Robert.
Great, thanks. And just one other point on this thing of privacy practice and ethics, Mark. What you're really saying is there doesn't have to be a breach or an event, that folks are being, there's legal actions being taken against them because they're in question, just not putting in place proper privacy and data management techniques.
That's right. They're just, it could be.
But it doesn't have to be that there's an event. It doesn't have to be
a security breach event. Does not have to happen. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. And again, I mean, it's okay. Well, we've really kind of gotten out there. And again, I want to thank all the participants. Especially, I want to thank our panel and giving us this time. It's been eye-opening. It really has. And like we like to say, the bad news is some of what we've heard, but there are ways. There are experts that you've heard that can help. There's insurance. And for those of you that are in the network and are insurance agents, there's all the resources and all the capability. For those of you that are for companies, there's really a whole lot of help that you or your insurance agent can get. So once again, just want to thank everybody for their participation, and we will follow up with the additional questions and answers that we just didn't get to. Once again, thanks to all the participants and to our experts. Okay, that's it.